Who could have known that today would be the first day of a new life for a 21-year-old young man with Down syndrome? All thanks to Morgan Freeman. Ethan was a 21-year-old young man with Down syndrome. In the past, he had gone through tough times because of his stepfather. But while he was trying to hold on to life thanks to his mother, today Olivia attempted to shatter his hopes. However, Morgan Freeman didn't just change this day. He changed the rest of his life entirely. Before listening to the whole story, we'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to our channel and support us. As the first rays of sunlight seeped through the narrow streets of the city, everything was just as it always had been, except for one thing. Today was Ethan's first day at work. Ethan woke up this morning on the verge of a new beginning. At 21, he was a young man with Down syndrome, and his excitement for life flowed like a waterfall within him. But behind his smile were deep wounds from his childhood. The harsh words of his stepfather still echoed in his mind. "You'll never amount to anything." But Ethan was a fighter. The obstacles he had faced in the past didn't break him. They only made him stronger. Today was his first day at the grocery store, and he wanted to prove to everyone that he could do it. Taking a deep breath, he stepped through the store's glass doors. He was wearing his new uniform, which was a source of pride for him. The store manager, Michael, approached him with a warm smile. "Welcome to the team, Ethan. It's great to have you here," he said, shaking Ethan's hand. Ethan shook his hand excitedly. "Thank you, sir. I promise to do my best." During his training, Ethan focused intently on every detail, carefully studying the shelf organization and the checkout system. However, some of his coworkers found his pace a bit slow. A few employees started whispering among themselves, "Is this kid really fit for the job?" Ethan tried to ignore what he heard, but the looks he received made him feel like he had something to prove. By the end of his shift, he was exhausted, but quitting wasn't an option for him. Just as he was finishing his last tasks, the automatic doors of the store slid open with a soft hiss, and Olivia walked in. Beside her was her 16-year-old son, Jason. Olivia was a 45-year-old woman with sharp features. Her expression of discontent was noticeable the moment she stepped inside. She scanned the checkout lanes and let out an exaggerated sigh. "These stores will never learn how to hire the right people," she muttered. Her son Jason laughed at her comment. "Seriously, Mom, is everyone here like this? Or just this one?" he said, locking eyes on Ethan. After quickly finishing her shopping, Olivia headed to the checkout and chose Ethan's line. She eyed him up and down, pursing her lips. "Is this real? How can someone this slow even work here?" she muttered under her breath. Jason smirked and added, "Maybe they shouldn't even bother teaching people like him to be cashiers." Olivia nodded in agreement. "Exactly. If you can't do something this simple quickly, maybe this job just isn't for you," she said coldly. Ethan tried to ignore what he was hearing, but Olivia's impatient gestures and Jason's mocking stares were making him nervous. As he carefully scanned the items, Olivia suddenly leaned forward in frustration. "Is this really going to take that long?" she snapped. Jason chuckled, turning to his mother. "Mom, maybe we should give him some time. After all, he doesn't think like a calculator, does he?" he whispered, smirking. But Ethan heard him. He felt his hands start to tremble slightly. The sharp words of Olivia and Jason tested his resilience once again. But this time, he needed to prove he wouldn't be the one to back down. Taking a deep breath, he continued standing behind the register. Somewhere deep inside, his mother's words from years ago echoed in his mind. "You have a pure heart, my son. No matter how much people try to hurt you, they can't dim your light." But right now, standing in front of Olivia and Jason, it was getting harder to hold on to those words. As the customer before them finished their transaction and walked away, Olivia impatiently stepped forward. She looked Ethan up and down, her intolerance written all over her face. "I hope we don't have to wait here all day," she grumbled. Jason followed her lead, smirking. Maybe they should bring in another cashier. But what can you do? Even the simplest jobs can be too hard for some people, he added mockingly. Ethan took another deep breath and continued scanning Olivia's items. He noticed his hands trembling slightly, but did his best to stay focused. Olivia, however, kept rolling her eyes and shaking her head at every minor mistake he made. How long is this going to take? Seriously, there's no excuse for being this slow. Are you even sure you're a cashier? She scoffed, crossing her arms. Jason grabbed one of the grocery bags and waved it in front of Ethan. Look, this is how it's done, he said mockingly. Can't be that hard, right? As his mother laughed, Ethan took a deep breath and tried to focus on his job, but he could feel sweat pouring from every part of his body. At the same time, the room seemed to grow hotter, and his face turned bright red. But Olivia wasn't slowing down. This is the kind of worker they think we deserve, she said, turning to the other customers. Do you see this? He can't even handle such a simple job. She raised her voice. Our time is valuable. What is this kid even doing here? Her words cut straight through Ethan. He noticed Jason leaning against the shopping cart beside him, watching the scene with a smirk. You shouldn't be working here, the teenager said, repeating his mother's words. Maybe some people just shouldn't have jobs at all. At that moment, Ethan's mind transported him to his past. Memories of his stepfather looking down on him, telling him he would never be good enough, flashed through his mind. But his mother had always instilled belief in him. You are valuable, Ethan. No matter what they say, you're going to achieve great things. With that thought, Ethan steadied his trembling hands and kept scanning the items. His voice was shaky but determined as he spoke. I'm doing my best. Today is my first day working here. Olivia let out a disdainful laugh. Oh, do you all hear that? He's giving us an explanation. Maybe we should be grateful to him. Jason laughed along, shaking his head. Yeah, Mom, he's really making a great effort. By now, the other customers in the store were starting to feel uncomfortable. Some looked as though they wanted to support Ethan, while others just watched in silence. But no one spoke up against Olivia and Jason. Just then, Ethan made a small mistake and dropped a box Olivia had purchased. The moment it hit the floor, Olivia immediately yelled in anger. Oh, wonderful. Just wonderful. Bravo. Are you going to break my groceries now too? They should take this out of your paycheck. Jason burst into laughter. Yeah, Mom. They should deduct it from his salary. Oh, wait. Maybe he doesn't even get paid at all. Ethan shut his eyes and took a deep breath. He could feel his hands growing sweatier. Swallowing his fear, he bent down, picked up the box, and placed it back on the counter. Just then, an elderly woman standing in line adjusted her bag and stepped forward. She looked at Ethan with a warm, sympathetic smile. Olivia, noticing that no one was stopping her, saw the silence as an opportunity to keep going. Turning back to Ethan, she raised her voice. If you can't do it, then go find something else to do. Someone needs to tell you that. Ethan visibly flinched. He took slow, steady breaths, gripping the bags with his sweaty hands and keeping his gaze fixed forward. Meanwhile, Olivia's eyes locked onto the store manager, Michael, who was at a distance. Michael finally noticed the commotion and sensed something was wrong. Ethan's checkout line had gotten unusually long. He started walking toward the scene, but another customer stopped him before he could reach them. As Ethan tried to finish the transaction, Olivia folded her arms and turned to the other customers. Do you all see this? We're all waiting because of him. This is ridiculous. You're completely useless, she snapped. At that moment, a man stood at the edge of the aisle, partially hidden behind the shelves, watching everything unfold. His posture was calm, but his expression was unreadable. He looked like an ordinary customer, but his gaze was locked onto the situation. He lowered his head slightly and crossed his arms as if analyzing every detail. Ethan had seen someone like him before. He tried to stay focused on his job, but something about the man's presence made him feel a subtle shift. Yet the situation he was in was crushing all the hope he had left. While no one spoke up against Olivia, the man had his full attention fixed on both Ethan and her. The rising tension in the store felt like it was reaching a breaking point. The murmurs among the customers grew louder as everyone waited to see what would happen next. And then, suddenly, the man stepped forward, commanding everyone's attention. "That's enough!" he shouted. Olivia's voice was instantly cut off. The entire store fell silent. It was clear. Something was about to change. Everyone turned to look at him. Who is this guy? They all seemed to wonder. But as the man stepped closer, it became obvious. It was Morgan Freeman. Ethan was still trying to steady himself. "I'm sorry. It was my mistake," he mumbled, terrified that he might get fired on his very first day. His stepfather's cruel words echoed in his mind. "You'll never amount to anything." Olivia turned to face the man, her expression a mix of anger, frustration, and condescension. "Oh, really? Is that all you've got?" she scoffed. "You're going to stand there and tell me how to behave?" Her tone was mocking, but there was an undeniable tension in her voice. Morgan Freeman, who had been quietly watching from the sidelines for a long time, finally spoke. "I can't tolerate this disrespect any longer," he said. His voice was both calm and authoritative. "And no, I'm not telling you how to behave, but what you're doing right now is wrong." Olivia blinked in surprise. "You don't even know what's going on. I'm just stating the facts." "The fact is, he's doing his job," Morgan replied, his gaze unwavering. "And you chose to humiliate him. There's a big difference between stating facts and using them as a weapon." A murmur began to spread through the crowd, but this time the attention had shifted from Ethan to Olivia. Ethan remained frozen, staring at Morgan, his eyes wide, his face unreadable. Why had this man stepped in? Yet deep down, it was comforting. Finally, someone was saying what he had been feeling all along. Morgan took a step closer. Ethan's expression softened. "May I know your name?" Morgan asked, his voice steady yet encouraging. Ethan swallowed lightly and stammered out his name. Morgan nodded approvingly. "Ethan, you're doing a great job. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise," he said. Then, gently, he placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We all go through tough moments, but they don't define who we are. Do you understand that, Ethan?" Ethan slowly nodded. His eyes were misty, but he held back his tears. At that moment, Olivia's frustration became even more apparent. She crossed her arms tightly and spoke, her voice laced with irritation. "I don't know who you think you are, but this has nothing to do with you. I just want fast service, and clearly, I'm not getting it." Morgan turned to Olivia, his face growing more serious. "Being kind costs nothing, and yet you've completely ignored that," he said. His voice was lower now, but the weight of his words shifted the air in the store. "I understand your frustration, but that does not give you the right to belittle someone else." For the first time, a woman in the crowd, who had remained silent until now, spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's right. This isn't fair at all. This kid is doing his best, and we should respect that." Another customer nodded in agreement. "Yeah, I don't like waiting either, but treating someone like this is just wrong." Supportive murmurs began to rise throughout the store. Olivia glanced around but found no backing. Instead, she was met with questioning stares from the other customers. Some had even pulled out their phones to record the scene. The entire atmosphere of the store had shifted. Morgan Freeman turned back to Ethan and gave him one more reassuring smile. "Keep being yourself," he said, "because who you are is already more than enough." Applause erupted from the customers. For Ethan, this was a moment he would never forget. As he looked around, he heard voices of support echoing through the store. The sound of Olivia's heels clicking on the floor grew fainter as the store's automatic doors closed behind her. For a few seconds, silence hung in the air before the customers started talking amongst themselves about what had just happened. Some continued looking at Morgan, while others exchanged glances of encouragement with Ethan. An elderly woman shook her head in amazement and turned to the person next to her. "Can you believe that? That was truly an incredible moment for him." The man beside her smiled slightly. "Yeah, the right person showed up at the perfect time." Ethan was still standing behind the counter, frozen in place. He looked down at his hands, processing everything that had just unfolded. A moment of humiliation had turned into something so unexpected that he himself was in shock. At last, the store manager arrived to check on him. He placed a hand gently on Ethan's and said, "I hope you're okay, Ethan." Ethan looked up at his manager and managed a small smile. "Yeah, I'm okay," he replied. But there was something different in his voice, something that hadn't been there before: confidence. Earlier that morning, before any of this had happened, his manager had told him, "Your worth is not measured by how good you are at your job." For a moment, Ethan recalled those words and smiled. He took a deep breath, as if shedding a weight he had carried for too long. It didn't take long for him to get back to work. The next customer smiled warmly at him. "Great job, Ethan. Don't let anyone talk down to you." An older man in line also took the opportunity to speak. "Hey, kid, keep going. You're braver than most people." Each encouraging word from the customers felt like a brick rebuilding his sense of self-worth, one step at a time. The energy in the store had completely changed. It was no longer filled with tension. It had transformed into a feeling of solidarity. Just minutes ago, Ethan had been ridiculed, his dignity stripped away. But with Morgan's intervention, everything had turned around. By the end of his shift, Ethan sat in the locker room, still processing the events of the day. He stared at his uniform on the wooden bench, thinking about everything that had happened. The day had felt endless, and for so long, he had believed he was invisible. He had only seen his mistakes, his differences. But today, he felt something new. Morgan's words had ignited something inside him. And for the first time, Ethan realized he was proud of himself. He remembered his mother's words, "You are a very valuable person." Now, after finishing his shift, he was heading toward her. As he stepped outside, he saw Morgan Freeman waiting. For Morgan, today had been a day to do what he believed was right. But before leaving, he wanted to say a few final words to Ethan. Today might just be the first day of the rest of your life. You are special. If anyone ever disrespects you or tries to bring you down, never be afraid. Just remember, this day, you're going to achieve great things in life. Believe in yourself. With that, he said, "Good night," got into his car, and drove away. The next day, social media was buzzing with the video of Morgan Freeman standing up for Ethan. The video had gone viral, shared by millions around the world. Hashtags like #respect for Ethan, #kindness matters, and #Morgan Freeman were trending, and messages of support flooded in. People had witnessed firsthand how even the smallest interventions could make a huge impact. Ethan, who had once been afraid of being noticed, was now a symbol of strength and resilience. That day had truly been the first day of his new life. In every moment of life, there will always be people like Olivia and her son, those who treat others unfairly. But let's never stand by and allow kindness to be overshadowed. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel to support us.